I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. And today I have joining me is Ellen Crocker. Billy cannot be here today, so Ellen is my co-host. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you. And I'm no Billy, but it's exciting to be here.
Exactly. So today we have some really interesting topics. We have Grace Coy, who's the coordinator for the Urban Forest Initiative, and she's going to be talking about some tree inventories. And then we have Kai Davis back again for some wildlife sounds. He is a graduate student for our department in Forestry and Natural Resources, and we greatly appreciate both of them being on today, and I really look forward to both of their presentations. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. So Grace, if you want to go ahead and turn on your video. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Renee. Good morning, Ellen. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about today.
Sure. Yeah. So I work for the Urban Forest Initiative, and one of the key things that we have been trying to implement is doing community level tree inventories. But I thought it would be good to give initially kind of a primer about community tree inventory and how we might leverage that data kind of in a general scale, just to talk about why they're important and all the meaning that we can derive from that information. So
wonderful. Looking forward to it. So you can go ahead and start your presentation if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. So thank you again. I am so excited to be on From the Woods today. This is my first time on the program. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope what I have for you today is interesting. And if you have any questions, I'll have my contact information at the end. But so today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about community tree inventory and community tree inventory data. So community tree inventories, in my opinion, are really excellent ways of getting some perspective on the types of trees that you have in your community. I think that the things that we can do with tree inventory data can not only have an impact on the way that we manage trees, but the data can also be leveraged for other purposes that I think can inspire a lot of change and kind of influence the investment that we see in community trees. So I like to say they have tremendous potential for meaningful utilization, whether that would be by forestry professionals, landowners, local and municipal staff, or members of the public. And I think, we can all acknowledge that trees are an essential part of our ecosystem, both in natural areas and in areas that are developing or urbanizing. That trees, no matter in what type of landscape that they're in, provide a wide range of benefits to our communities. So to be able to collect and analyze information about trees empowers us to practice greater agency over our community forestry network, and in turn, it allows us to better support our arboreal companions. So first, I'll just give a brief overview of what we'll go over in the next 20-ish minutes. So I'll define what I mean when I'm talking about a community tree inventory, and I'll make a comparison to another type of tree canopy data that someone might collect. Next, I'll go into some key ways that a community tree inventory could be utilized meaningfully, and then I'll briefly discuss some case studies, and I'll end by going through some of the basic steps one might take in conducting a community tree inventory. But a small disclaimer on that last point, that could be a whole topic in and of itself. So I'm just going to give a briefing of the steps and would certainly be happy to share in more detail about the community tree inventory process and what those steps might look like more fleshed out on a different date. So let's start with that definition. When I'm talking about a community tree inventory, I'm talking about a comprehensive survey that documents the location, species, size, maybe there's health indicators, or any other important characteristics that are determined to be purposeful or meaningful for the end that you're trying to get to with collecting that information. And it's typically within a given area. These can be city or town wide, or they could be done on smaller scale, such as in a neighborhood or at a park level. So that what the community is can be set by whoever is collecting that information. Inventories are usually conducted by trained professionals. I think a lot of the more widely known community tree inventories and canopy assessments are typically done by people who are staffed and trained exclusively to do so, but that doesn't mean it always has to be the case. Community volunteers can also be trained to collect some information about the local tree canopy. And it really just depends on the type of data that you want and how you want that to be shared and what kind of quality controls you can put into place. So to further distinguish the concept of a community tree inventory, I want to compare it also to its cousin, which is a tree canopy assessment. So these are two really amazing tools that we can use to get a better idea of either the specific trees that we have in an area or kind of the general distribution. So with the tree inventory, it's a more bottom-up approach. You're collecting specific information about individual trees within your given study area. And so those data points or the type of data that you collect can vary, but it's for an individual tree basis. And it typically requires a pretty significant amount of field work. It's literally like boots on the ground type of work. Its cousin, which is the tree canopy assessment, that's more of a top-down approach typically. And usually the result of those types of assessments, you get spatial distribution of trees in a community. So you might get percentage of canopy for like a census block or maybe a district or something in your area. And those can all typically be done from a computer using various sources such as satellite imagery. There are online tools that allow you to do so. I think iTree is one that I can think of off the top of my head, and other mapping software. And so you can see from the two images that is of around the same location. And the one on the left is the inventory. So you can see point data. Each of those data points has a tree species, size. You can check out the ecological benefits the tree is providing. So it provides a very robust set of information for each individual tree. Whereas the one on the right is a tree canopy assessment. And you can see it's a little small, but you have more general data about all of the trees within a given kind of polygon, or in this case, it was by census block. So I just like to distinguish those two. They're both very useful, but they have kind of different applications. And so I'll be talking mostly about tree inventory today. So why are tree inventories important? They have so many uses, and I think there are some standard ways that they're used, but I think there are also some ways that we could creatively use the data that we can visualize. So I'll touch on that on the last point, but I'm just going to walk through each one of these briefly and talk about how this information might be used or how you might leverage this type of information if you were to get access to it. So the first is tree inventory data can help us to better understand the benefits that trees in our area provide. Depending on what type of software you might use, by getting information, size information, species information about trees, you can quantify even to a dollar amount what type of benefits that tree is providing, the ecosystem benefits specifically. And that can be really useful in that it can communicate kind of the story of the value of trees in your study area. And it can help also make some informed decision about where to plant new trees, which species to prioritize, given the types of benefits that you're either seeing gaps in or that you'd like to see more of, and then how to allocate resources, which I'll get into a little bit in one of the next ones. The second one here is identifying potential risks and hazards associated with trees. So getting a ground level look at trees in your area, whether they be street trees or if you're looking community-wide, it's really good to have as part of your tree inventory, being able to assess the condition or having someone on staff who can assess the condition or potential hazards associated with trees. This can help with mitigation and if there's certain types of maintenance that needs to be recommended. By having the inventory, it makes it much more easy to manage that data and to keep track of maintenance that's required to keep the public and infrastructure safe. So for those that have the capacity, tracking maintenance and keeping track, staying on top of tree inspections, leveraging that inventory data can be a really great way to ensure there's continuous attention and maintenance happening to mitigate any potential risks. And so this kind of goes into the next point, providing information to help with planning and management. So obviously, mitigating risk is going to be a part of the types of planning and management that we would want for urban forest, but it can also help with forecasting. It can help in influencing recommendations for development and long-range plans. I have a background in planning, and I know having even access to canopy data was really influential in when developments would come in or when policy changes were proposed, to be able to lean on that to justify the need for trees in particular areas. So by knowing where trees are located, what species there are, we can really prioritize and get some clarity on what our needs are in different areas. And I think in that way too, we can just manage our community forest more effectively and set policy more effectively. So supporting budget justifications. So having numbers is really good when you're asking for funding or trying to justify whether it be a municipal budget or just doing any type of long range plans where you might need to have sort of values assigned to what it might take to reach canopy goals or what it might take to maintain current canopy. And so by having that information, folks can feel empowered to be able to clearly communicate what exactly the costs are, and then they can uplift that by saying all of the benefits that those trees provide in turn. So the more numbers, the more information that we can have about our canopy, I think the stronger those justifications are, and the more investment that we can get into management where it's needed. So doing tree inventories also allows for opportunities for public engagement. So as I said sort of earlier on, even though doing tree inventory with trained professionals has the certain amount of quality control that we like to see, there are also so many opportunities to train and engage the public. A lot of the tree inventories that I've been a part of or that I've seen reports from, they do have a citizen volunteer element to them, or maybe student interns who are trained to collect information. And so long as the information that's being collected and shared is there is a quality control element, doing a tree inventory with volunteer support can be super fun, and it can be super meaningful, not only to whoever's hosting it, but to the volunteers participating. It's a great way to be immersed in things like tree ID, to just notice and be able to kind of do a general sort of observation of trees. I think it really gets people paying attention, and it gives them a sense of awareness about the trees in their community. And also just in the tree measuring process, you get to hug a tree, which I think, that in of itself has a certain warmth to it, depending on the type of person that you are. But the mechanics of it too are something that I think can be really empowering for people. And then when the reports come out and the way that the data is aggregated and shared with the public, it can be really meaningful for volunteers to see how they've been an influence and been able to play a part in sharing that meaningful data, and then also in receiving it. That gives them something that they could use to speak with neighbors or friends about, to speak about the value of trees. And so it just continues to pay dividends and getting public engagement and public awareness about urban tree canopy. And so this last one is I think where there's still a lot of creativity that is at like an immense amount of potential for creativity with some of the projects and initiatives that can be derived from from community tree inventory data, which is them being used creatively to inspire kind of additional projects or activities. So the one that I use in the image here is one that we have here in Lexington, Kentucky, which is a Go See Trees scavenger hunt. And so they collect point data about the location of trees, and then you can go around and visit trees. And if you visit all of them, I think you have like a passport and you can turn it in for a prize and that kind of thing. So, you know, they've leveraged the information that they're able to collect to have an activity that people can use to learn about trees and get outside and all of that good stuff. I also think the potential to visualize tree inventory data, we have kind of our standard ways of doing so, but I think there's so much creative potential too in how that data could be visualized, artistically even, that could bring people closer to the value of trees, using the language of data as the basis, but then adding on layers of maybe some interpretation or visualization. Maybe we stylize it in certain ways. I just think there's a lot of potential for the stories that could be told from tree canopy data that might not be captured in 1 through 5 there, but that could be translated to different audiences. So the what's the word I'm trying to think of? Totally blank, but definitely a lot of opportunity there. So those are just kind of the main things that as I was going through and kind of expanding, okay, how is this data potentially useful? There are probably other ways that could be expanded upon, but those are the main ones that come to mind for me. So next I'll talk very briefly about just some case studies showing tree inventories at work in US cities. So the first one is Portland, Oregon. So in Baltimore, they really did something similar. So this is just 2 communities that have pretty robust contributions to their community tree inventory and have used it to directly influence, sort of like, as I was talking about in the previous slide, guiding their planting plans and their long-term management. In Portland, they had volunteers do the mapping. They have a whole student-led cohort of it's kind of on a rolling basis where they have students that train and they collect this data. And so it's a very engaging process. And I think it's one that they've been doing for years now. And they've been able to add a lot of information to their community tree inventory. And they use that to plan their future canopy and make management decisions. And so they have the backing of that data and the positive influence that it can have, not only to communicate canopy needs, but to be, to set priorities and have like maintenance and that kind of thing. And similar with Baltimore, I'm not sure if they used a consultant or if it was volunteer created, but they've collected information on over 300,000 trees in their community. And they use that to influence their urban forestry management plan. And within that plan, they also expanded on strategies to engage the public and educating them not only through the data, but also on proper tree planting and care. And then last but not least is Lexington, Kentucky. So I spoke earlier about tree canopy assessment, and that's something that Lexington, Kentucky has had completed recently. And but on kind of a smaller scale, the Urban Forest Initiative, which is the group that I work for, we have been trying to supplement that canopy assessment data with smaller volunteer-led tree inventories across the state. A lot of them in Lexington, but also in some of our satellite communities that we work with. But mostly we've been documenting street trees and park trees throughout the community. And so again, mostly these are at a neighborhood or park level, and we actively engage trained volunteers. We typically have student interns that help us, and then we always have staff in place for quality control. And one thing that is really important for us is the data collection, but also how we aggregate and report on that data in a way that helps visualize kind of the high points and can be distributed to a public audience for them to not only get more information, but to share that information with people in their network. So we try to keep things easy to understand, communicate kind of the importance of biodiversity and kind of different metrics, and then also communicating the benefits that the trees in the study area provide. And so, as I mentioned, I won't go too much into this. It could be for another day. But one thing I wanted to highlight is a lot of the tree inventories are done using GIS data or using GIS data collection tools. And I think that makes things a lot easier, but I don't want it to seem also too that would be disempowering to if you didn't have access to that type of software. And so again, I won't get too much into it, but it is possible to do smaller scale or large scale tree inventories without having access to certain software that can be expensive. And so just having a good data management system and, you could even draw a physical map, anything that you would use as a platform to collect information, just depending on how you want to use it. You're not locked into needing to get really expensive software or whatever, depending on what your intentions are. So anyone can do a tree inventory. It just depends on the type of data that you'd like to collect, the purpose of that inventory and the scale. But I'm happy to talk more about that another day. I think I'm out of time, and I just want to thank you all so much. And my email's right there if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace. We greatly appreciate that. And we appreciate you giving us all this information. And I was looking to see in the chat if there was any questions. And so far, I'm not seeing any. So I think you covered it all.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
We greatly appreciate it. All right, now moving on, we have wildlife sounds, and Kai Davis is on to talk about some new birds that he's going to be talking about. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about some birds. So yeah, hello and good morning to you all and everybody. Thanks for having me on again, Renee and Ellen.
We greatly appreciate it. We always look forward to what new birds you're going to come up with. So what's the color for this week?
So the color for today is going to be brown.
Brown. Okay.
Yeah. And let's see.
Definitely. And I was really excited last time that I knew any of your birds. So
Yeah.
if you are a baby beginner birder like me, make sure you check out some of the resources that are online. Like I've been using the Merlin app. Some of the community science birding projects out there from eBird are great. And you can go from knowing nothing about birds to knowing ever so slightly a little tiny bit about birds,
Yeah.
enough so that you might recognize a bird or two that Kai is going to play us today.
Yeah, that's how I got into it. Definitely through Merlin and just trial and error as I got out there. So yeah, it definitely will teach you a lot, just enough to where you can teach some bird calls from the woods today. So
yeah,
I'm ready. Yeah. All right. So again, my name is Kai Davis. I come on to do wildlife sounds, specifically birds, and I do a color theme every day that I come on. And like I said, today's brown. So I choose one local bird that we'll find throughout the seasons here in Kentucky or specifically Lexington. And then the second bird will be a migratory bird that we'll find based on the season that we're in currently. So obviously we're at the end of March going into April. So there's kind of that bleed over, but around springtime migration. So I shall go ahead and get started. All right, now we'll get started. So I'll start off with the local bird first. Okay, so I'll play this one again for you all. Like this one might not surprise me that a lot of people may know it. And if you have a guess for it, feel free to put it in the chat. I like to see what people are thinking and to kind of work through what birds they might be thinking it is, but I'll play it one more time. so let's get your last few guesses in, and it is a mourning dove. So this is going to be one of our most familiar bird sounds. It's that low, mournful, hence its name with mourning dove, that coo-ah, coo, coo, coo. And before on, I was like, I could just take my computer outside because there are like 3 mourning doves calling just out in my backyard. So really common birds. Like I said, not surprised that some people might recognize this. May not know the bird, but at least may have heard it plenty of times. So let's learn some more about the mourning dove. So within their life history and behavior, European settlement of this continent opened up a lot of the forests and probably helped this species to increase in number and to settle those areas. And it also helps itself with the prolific breeding it has. So within courtship, the pair will preen each other and do gentle nibbles around its neck as its bonding ritual. And then eventually the pair will progress to grasping beaks and bob their heads up and down in unison. So it's kind of a cool little dance that they do. So mourning doves tend to feed busily on the ground, swallowing seeds and storing them in an enlargement in the esophagus called the crop. And remember the crop because I'll come back to that. And then they'll carry that and digest it later after collecting and once they're in a safe place. So speaking of eating and diet, the mourning dove, they eat roughly around 12 to 20% of their body weight per day. And for those calorie counters, that's around 71 calories on average per day. So that's quite a bit for this bird. So seeds make up 99% of the mourning dove's diet. The remaining 1% includes peanuts, wild grasses, weeds, herbs, occasionally berries, and sometimes even snails. So for their habitat and location, as we can see, they're pretty much all throughout the United States and North America going into Central America. And you can see it even in the Caribbean islands too. So they're pretty well throughout the North America in this area. So they do very well in man-altered habitats, as we probably all know, as we've seen them throughout the city and urban areas too. So they're found in almost any kind of open or semi-open habitat and even treeless areas. And I'm not supporting treeless areas, Grace, so please don't come after me. We like trees too. So they're primarily a bird of open country, scattered trees, and woodland edges outside of the urban setting too, but they can establish pretty much anything. So for their conservation and threats, from about 1966 to 2019, there's been a cumulative decline of about 20%. So the estimated global population is going to be around 150 million. So it's a species of low conservation concern. However, there is a threat that is threatening the conservation of this species, and that's lead poisoning, particularly from them foraging on the lead pellets that they're hunted with. So ironically enough, hunting itself isn't the direct conservation threat to the species, but the resulting lead bullets, lead pellets that are left behind that these birds might swallow and then get lead poisoning from. So diving into fun facts for this dumpy little bird at times, but cute. So going back to the crop, the record for the most amount of seeds in one single crop is 17,200 bluegrass seeds. It would have been fun to make you all guess, but I'll just go ahead and reveal. And then another fun fact, they can drink brackish spring water without becoming dehydrated the way humans would. So that helps them to establish various areas throughout North America, especially in desert areas, to be able to drink some brackish water. So that's all on the mourning dove. So I hope there's an appreciation for this little bird. And then now we'll go to the migratory bird. So I will go ahead and play this. Again, feel free to put your guess in the chats if you think you can identify it. All right, so yeah, this one's probably a bit tougher than the mourning dove. I will play it again, but I will say that the way that I think about this bird is it's kind of a mix between a robin song and a red-winged blackbird song and call too. So if you all were thinking that it's one of those two, unfortunately you are wrong, but you are close because it does kind of sound like both of those, but I'll play it again one more time. All right, so last guess is in, and it is wood thrush. All right, so yeah, the wood thrush, it's this loud, fluty song. It's like an Eole song. So it's Eole, and then it has that trill at the end of it that kind of reminds me of like a red-winged blackbird. So again, kind of that mix between the two, that fluty and then that trill. So let's learn some more about the wood thrush. So within their life history and behavior, they're one of the first songsters to be heard in the morning and among the last in the evening. So if you really want to listen, you could probably go out in some of its areas and listen in the morning and then late in the evening, try to catch this bird. So wood thrushes forage by hopping around leaf litter on the forest floor, tossing leaves to look for insects and probing for prey. The pairs are socially monogamous. So hold on to that fact. They are socially monogamous. So courtship includes the male singing, and that's followed by the female enticing him to chase her in a silent circular flights 3 to 6 feet above the ground. So it'd be kind of cool to see. In terms of their diet, as we can see in the pictures, one's eating an invertebrate, the other is eating a berry. So that's pretty much their diet. They feed mostly on leaf litter, invertebrates, and fruits from shrubs. So insects, snails, salamanders that are found in trees can also be fair game for this species too. Fruits like berries make up most of the rest of their diet outside of the invertebrates. So in the late summer and fall, after breeding seasons, they shift their diet towards fruits, particularly fatty fruits, in preparation for the demands of migration. So in terms of habitat, they can be found in fragmented forests, even suburban parks where there are enough large trees for territory. However, they are still common in eastern woodlands in general. Their ideal habitat includes trees over 50 feet tall, a moderate understory of sapling and shrubs, an open floor with moist soil and decaying leaf litter, and then water nearby. So in terms of their migration, as you can see in the map, they breed here in Kentucky and surrounding areas. They're long distance migrants. They migrate twice a year and they migrate mostly at night. They spend the fall and winter in Central America, and they cross the Gulf of Mexico in a single night's flight. So very impressive flyers. They return north in the spring 2 to 6 times faster on a route that's generally somewhat farther west. So they travel around this route, and it happens to be a little bit faster than when they go down. So males arrive in the breeding grounds several days before females too, to establish those areas to prepare for breeding opportunities. So for their conservation and threats, there's been a cumulative decline of about 50% between 1966 to 2019. It estimates a global breeding population of about 12 million. So this species is on the yellow watch list for birds most at risk of extinction without significant conservation actions to reverse declines and reduce threats. So some of the threats include cowbird nest parasitism at the edge of the fragmenting habitat. And if you're not familiar with cowbirds, they will put their eggs in nests of other birds and allow those birds to raise their young. And the wood thrush in particular is susceptible to it because it doesn't really recognize that bird as a different bird. And that bird will take over the nest over the other wood thrush bird. So it makes it harder for them to get the food that they need as chicks. And then those cowbirds can establish those territories and take it from the wood thrush. So also acid rain will deplete the invertebrate prey population. So these wood thrush will have less prey to consume. And then habitat fragmentation on their breeding grounds as well as their wintering grounds too. So fragmented habitats will have lower quality food choices expose their nests to predators such as raccoons, jays, crows, and domestic and feral cats. So again, keep your cats inside, not just for the sake of these birds, but for other wildlife in general. And then in Central America, the loss of lowland tropical forest shrinks their winter habitat too. So they're suffering from a lot of different threats. However, let's talk about some fun facts. So the male wood thrush does more feeding of the chicks than the female does, which is kind of interesting. However, it's just so that the female can, so that the male can free up the female to start a second brood. So once the next brood fledges, the pair will divide them up and then feed them separately in the same territory. So it's kind of interesting how they do that. And then going back to them being socially monogamous, the pairs, they do raise their broods together. However, they are known to fool around or have extra pair copulation. That's common. So at some sites, there is as many as 40% of the female's young that aren't followed by its mate. So they get around, but they are cool little birds with some nice sounds. And then that's everything for me. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to next time.
Wonderful. Great job, Kai. Really enjoyed it as always.
Thank you
And
very much.
I knew one of them, but not the second one.
Yeah,
It's funny
yeah.
that you had doves, because literally like 2 days ago, I went up to my front porch and there was 2 doves that was on there, and they flew. It scared me because, you know, they make that noise.
Yeah, that yeah.
Yeah, and it scared me because I wasn't expecting a noise and 2 doves to be on my front porch. But
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure they weren't expecting you either.
they probably scared them a whole lot more than they scared me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on again. I look forward to next time.
Does
Great.
anybody
And
have a question?
you know, before you go, I've got a question for you.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
I know that we've got migratory birds coming through right now, and you mentioned one of them. Are there other birds that people in our area should be on the lookout for that you've been seeing lately?
Oh goodness. I was not prepared for that question. There are a ton, yeah, there are a ton of birds that are coming in and also leaving. So when I was looking at what birds I want to choose for this, there was a lot of sparrows that are leaving and coming in. So like white-throated, it's on its way out. And then there's a lot of warblers that are working their way in as well. Although I will say it's getting kind of hard for me to choose birds based on color, because we're starting to get into multicolored birds that are coming in. So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit difficult.
Multicolored one time.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll have to do a multicolored day. And then I know Kentucky Warbler is on its way in too, because I was thinking about choosing that.
And I know some woodpeckers are in and
Oh
out.
yeah.
We had Dr. McNeil on. I was talking about woodpeckers the other day, saying
Mhm.
coming in. So someone just asked about how about woodcock? Do you know?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with woodcock, so maybe they are rolling in. And yeah, so like I said, I am still new at this and I'm learning on the
He's
go.
learning
And
now.
this,
He's
Well,
getting there. He's a graduate.
yeah.
we enjoy learning with you. So thank you,
Oh
Kai,
yeah.
and thanks for talking
Yeah.
with us today.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that.
And if anyone else has questions, please put them in the chat for either Kai or Grace. Appreciate both of them joining us today.
Grace is still on. I think we did have a question.
Yeah, Grace. Oh,
Grace,
go ahead.
go ahead and get back on if you're available. Okay, wonderful.
Hi.
So Grace, I know you mentioned some different types of tree inventories that cities and communities can be doing. Sometimes I get questions from landowners who want to have a better way to inventory like the trees in their yard and keep track of that. Do you have recommendations or tools that you would steer them to?
That's a really good question. And it was one that I was thinking about kind of in that last slide, which is if you don't want to, or, don't see need to invest in like really expensive GIS software or GPS sort of collection. I mean, people, depending on the level of detail they want, you could even kind of draw a map and mark the trees' locations. And I did find a spreadsheet that I can share. It might take me a second to find it. That is like a tree data management form that you could use. You could write the species down and you could just manage it completely offline and have that just for your records. Or if you're familiar with Excel and you want to set up different columns, you can record that data and manage it just privately from, from your home office. That would totally be possible. Another thing now that I've used on the fly is if you have a smartphone, you can use like a compass app or some type of app that's free or even already comes installed on the phone that you can use to collect pretty like accurate GPS coordinates for different trees. And then you can use that data management sort of sheet or whatever information you like to collect to input the coordinates. And as I mentioned, you could have a physical map that maybe you create, you draw it by hand or use some other type of program and just have that for your property. And you could keep your maintenance schedule and all of those things organized. Whether you do check every tree every year, you have a certain schedule for the work that needs to be done. But let me see if I can pull up that form. Might take me a minute, but I did find one that was blank and it was I had some good, it was set up pretty well, I think, if you were wanting to collect kind of basic information.
That's all
And I
right.
know that there are several apps out there as well, like the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities app, and
Oh,
others
right.
that folks might be interested in checking out if we're talking, that might be another useful resource.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I totally forgot about that one.
Well,
That
and I know
one's
that,
free to use.
and there's always new things coming out. And so if you have anything you like to use, share that with us and we can get it out to folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another set of apps that are useful when you're doing a tree inventory that I didn't speak on were things that can help you with that tree ID. So that, measuring a tree is one thing, but to know what the species of the tree is that you're measuring, if species information is something that you'd like to collect, and tree ID maybe is something that you're just learning, there are apps available to help with that too. The one that I use is, it's not there's the one that is iNaturalist.
iNaturalist is a great one.
Yes.
But there are some others that have really nice, like dichotomous keys. The Virginia Tech Tree ID app is another really good one. And we do, for anybody watching, we have some fantastic videos from Lori Thomas, Tree of the Week, some other great identification resources.
Definitely. There's a whole slew of them. I think we have over 80. So there's a lot of tree ID on there.
Well, and it's such a big topic, and you can there's so many different types of trees, even here in Kentucky. So you can get super detailed with it and then be an expert. Yeah, I'm so glad we have those resources.
Right. Well, thank you, Grace. We greatly appreciate you giving your presentation today and really looking forward to it. And we're looking forward to other presentations that you're going to do in the future. I know I've got you on for one in I don't know, maybe a month or so. So we'll be glad to have you back soon.
I think I'm on one next week, and I promise to try to talk slower next time. You
did great. Don't worry.
Well, thank you all so much, and thank you for the questions.
Sure. All right, a lot of good information this week, Ellen.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit more for you.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that they're invited to the Kentucky Master Naturalist Conference that's coming up in just a few weeks. This is something that's geared towards master naturalists, but if you're interested in becoming a master naturalist, or maybe you're just interested in learning more about the natural world, this might be something you might be interested in. So we're going to have a weekend of different events, hikes and talks and walks and community science and more at Lake Barkley State Resort Park and Land Between the Lakes. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, check this out. You can find more information online. You can register here with this QR code, or I'll put a link in the chat. And that's coming up on April 14th and 15th, again at Lake Barkley and Land Between the Lakes. And if you're interested in the Master Naturalist program in general, we have 2 trainings coming up for new Master Naturalists. So you can become a Master Naturalist, and you can find out more about those at our website.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We greatly appreciate that. And you know, Ellen, I appreciate you so much being my co-host today, since Billy was out at a meeting, and appreciate you joining us as well. And you.
Oh, anytime. I can't exactly fill Billy's shoes, because he is a pretty fun co-host. But it's always a pleasure to be on, to talk with you, and to hear from our great guests.
Yes, we love our guests, and we appreciate them joining us each and every week. And you know, you can always go to fromthewoodstoday.com if you missed any of our episodes, and you can binge watch us, Billy and I say all the time. We greatly appreciate again you joining us. Be here next week at 11 o'clock. Until then, take care. Bye.
From the woods today.